Hello and welcome to the show that debates and deconstructs the hottest issues of the day. You're watching The Big Picture. I'm Athar Khan. Yesterday, the Planning Commission released the latest poverty estimates for a country showing a decline in the incidence of poverty by 7.3% over the past 5 years. By doing so, the Planning Commission has effectively stated that anyone with a daily consumption expenditure of 28 rupees 35 paisa in urban areas and 22 rupees 42 paisa in rural areas is above the poverty line. The new poverty estimates for 2011-12 have only added to the furor, if I can call it that, triggered by the Commission's affidavit in the Supreme Court in October, in which the BPL cap was pegged at 32 rupees and 26 rupees for urban and rural areas, respectively. The Planning Commission set aside the cap suggested by the Tendulkar Committee and set up a new committee to work out the methodology to identify BPL households. The Minister for Rural Development, Jairam Ramesh, has gone on record saying that the present system will have to continue till the socio-economic and caste census is completed, which is when a new system would be worked out. The total number of people below the poverty line in the country is now 35.46 crores as against 40.72 crores in 2004-2005. In rural areas, the number has come down from 32.58 crore 5 years ago to 27.82 crore, and the urban BPL number stands at 7.64 crore as against 8.14 crore 5 years ago. Tonight on The Big Picture, we debate the wisdom behind reducing the BPL cap, especially after the affidavit in the Supreme Court invited heavy criticism by civil society and food security activists. We also try and figure out what exactly decides normative for the government. Food security is one of the most important issues before the government, and to help us go just beyond the headlines, Biraj Patnaik joins us in the studio. Biraj needs little introduction. He is the Supreme Court appointed advisor to the Right to Food program. Also joining us a little later on the program will be Himanshu, who teaches at JNU. Also joining us on the show for the first time is Dr. Soumitra Chaudhary, member Planning Commission, as well as a little later in the show we'll be joined by Tarun Vijay, who is a member of the Rajya Sabha from the BJP. But I would like to start the show, if I could, with Dr. Soumitra Chaudhary. Welcome to the show, Dr. Chaudhary. First of all, I'd like to ask you this. When we say there is a 7.3 percentage points from 37.2% in 2004-05 to 29.8% in 2009-10 drop in poverty, what is the context of this big reduction? Just give us a sense, and our viewers a sense, what is the context of this reduction?
Planning Commission computes the poverty, makes the poverty estimate based on the large sample consumption surveys conducted by the National Sample Survey Organization. Traditionally, they do it once every 5 years. The last survey was in 2004-05 and the most recent one was 2009-10. Till about 6 months ago, we did not have the complete compiled data for 9-10. We only had the 04-05 numbers. The number that you mentioned about 32 rupees in the Supreme Court, there was an affidavit in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court asked us what the poverty line was, and we said the Tendulkar poverty line, as in 2004-05, was X. So they said, update this for present prices. So we updated it for June 2011 prices. That is our submission to the Supreme Court. This survey is based on 2009-10 actual consumption expenditure, about 1.5 years before June 2011. There naturally would be some differences in the poverty line that would come out from this process compared to what was an ad hoc calculation based on price indices for June 2011. In the press conferences today, we have also computed what the 2009-10 poverty line would look like at June 2011 prices, and in fact they're not very different from what submissions that we made to the Supreme Court in October.
Right. Dr. Chaudhary, stay with us. Let's get the other perspective, the other side of the spectrum. Biraj, you heard what Soumitra Chaudhary had to say. What is this reduction really a reflection of?
Well, actually, it's an updation. He's absolutely right what he said in terms of this is not a new exercise. This is not something that's being done afresh. And I would hesitate to attribute malice to something that is a result of sheer insensitivity of the Planning Commission. Because look, the Supreme Court had in fact requested the Government of India and the Planning Commission to reconsider the poverty line because they considered it too low. And instead of doing that, they come up with a line updated very rightly, as Dr. Chaudhary pointed out, with something that is lower. And if you look at the original Tendulkar line and you look at the consumption share in the original Tendulkar line, you're talking about an expenditure of 70 paisa per day on egg, fish and meat. You're talking about a consumption of 4 rupees 30 paisa a month on education. You're talking about 8 rupees a month expenditure on fresh fruits. Now, these are not figures that the Planning Commission has cooked up. These are figures which are based on the actual consumption data. But what this tells us, it reflects on a complete failure of economic reforms. It reflects on 20 years of wasted effort, of inequitable growth. Because at the end of the day, even with this poverty line, which many of us think is completely minimalist, you're talking about more than a third of this country living below that poverty line.
Right, fair point.
And I think that's what we need to consider. That, and what I'd also like to say, Athar, is the timing of this move. You know, I'm quite baffled. Was there complete consensus within the Planning Commission that this has to be released in the middle of the budget session? What was the urgency to release it right away when you have delayed filing an affidavit to the Supreme Court for 7 months? What was the need to file this today?
Right,
so I'm quite baffled by the timing.
Questions that you've raised, and we'll ask those questions not just to Mr. Chaudhary but other guests who are joining the show as well. We'll take a short breather right now. We'll return on the other side with lots more. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Picture. Another guest has joined us on the program. Himanshu, welcome to the show. Himanshu teaches in JNU. Coming to you, Himanshu, we just heard from Dr. Samitra Chaudhary as well as Biraj. We were talking about what this reduction in the poverty line, the cap, is really a reflection of. Your thoughts?
First of all, I don't think it's a reduction in that sense. It's a poverty line which is being presented for 2 different years. One is for 2009, the other one is for 2011. So I think but it's the same poverty line which was suggested by the Tendulkar poverty line. So in that sense, that is not so much of different from what Tendulkar committee suggested. It's just an updation of prices. But I think there are good messages that are coming from the data that has come out, and particularly at the state level. And I think we need to look at those numbers more carefully as to whether the slogan of inclusive growth in the last 5 or 6 years, has it actually led to some kind of improvement in the living conditions of the poor people in the country or not. And there are mixed pictures. I mean, the poorer states of Bihar, UP, Assam, Chhattisgarh also to some certain extent, these have not seen any reduction in poverty. On the other hand, most of the poverty reduction has happened in states such as Himachal, Tamil Nadu and those states, Orissa for example. And we need to ask those questions as to what exactly do these numbers mean in terms of prioritizing certain public services, whether it is NREGA or it is PDS or any other public services, versus the single most obsession on growth that the government has been focusing for quite some time.
Right. Let's go across to Tarun Vijay. I've been told that Tarun Vijay has joined us on the program. Welcome to the show, Tarun. Biraj Patnaik talked about the timing of this decision. Your thoughts, does it seem that the government was bent upon pushing this in the budget session itself? Your thoughts on the rates being reduced or the updation of rates like my guests say?
It looks as if our disparate government was trying to achieve some points, and this is not exactly fudging the statistics, but this is certainly something which befools the people through the jugglery of statistics. I agree there was a different criteria for 2009 and 10, 2640 and 2865 rupees, but anyone would say that even those figures look very absurd. How can you deny the BPL card to millions of people who are having or would be having an income of say 29 rupees a month or 30 rupees a month? Can any human being live even with the least dignity and even with the, I'm sorry to say, like animals, in 30 rupees a month? They need housing, they need clothing, they need something to eat twice a day, and then they need medical facilities.
Right, Tarun.
How is it possible for any human being to live in this criteria? And then saying that because of adopting the new criteria, poverty has declined or the number of poor people has declined.
Right, right.
It's something which is a mockery.
Right, right. Tarun, that's a very important question you asked, and one question I'm sure to put to Dr. Soumitra Chaudhary. But before we go to Dr. Chaudhary, let's see what Montek Singh Ahluwalia, the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, he held a press conference today. Let's see what he had to say on the issue.
The basic poverty line is the same. When we were asked to update by the court what is the most recent, that was June 2011, here we are using the poverty line for the consumer survey of 2009-2010, and therefore this is a little lower than what was reported last year.
That was Montek Singh Ahluwalia, Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, held hastily, if I could call it that, hasty press conference in the afternoon. Dr. Soumitra Chaudhary, on the face of it, it would seem that things are changing for the better for the poor of the country. Is it that simple?
Where do I start? I mean, your panelists have said many things, but since you're asking me a question outright, and I don't think I should respond to them. But let us get one thing clear. There has been no reduction of the caps. I think Himanshu tried to make that clear. One is the June 2011 prices, one is 2009-10, 1.5 years before. They are not the same thing. There has been no reduction of anything, number one. Number two, if you look at the period, why do we do these poverty estimates? We do these poverty estimates to see the impact of our development policy on what has happened to those who are comparatively marginalized sections of society. The policy has been for a very long time under different governments directed at trying to reduce poverty. That's why we do this exercise. It's a different matter that at certain point of time, in I think a very good intentions, we had a targeted subsidy programs where this BPL card was, the concept of BPL card came up. And this experiment has had some unhappy consequences, as a result of which the SEC survey is being carried out, and essentially entitlements will not flow from what we compute as poverty. So this is an academic exercise based on the NSSO consumption, household consumption surveys with a methodology which is understood and it is uniform for time periods, and we want to see what happened in between those time periods, both at the national level as well as the state level of the individual states.
Dr. Chaudhary, fair point, but Biraj Patnaik would like to respond to you. Go ahead, Biraj.
No, I think, that is essentially the problem. You've hit it on the nail, that government has used the poverty exercise to target subsidies, to create this artificial distinction of BP and ABL, and an experiment that has completely failed. And it persists with it, and that is the problem. Now, 4 months ago, there was a joint statement, if you remember, in October. In October, by the Minister of Rural Development and the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, that the Tendulkar caps will not be used. Exactly 2 months later, they had to introduce the Food Security Bill in Parliament, and they used a formula of Tendulkar at 2004-05 prices plus 10%. I mean, this 46 plus 28 has not come from the air. It has come from the Tendulkar caps. There is no clarity on how the SECC will be used. In fact, let me tell you what the government is hoping to do is to do a backward exercise, because the SECC data is online as the survey is happening. At some stage, they're going to look at the entire data and say, okay, this is what we have, and therefore this must be what we need.
Right.
Whereas the solution is, in my mind, very simple. Don't try to go through this exercise. Use the exclusion criteria if you must. If you cannot have a universal program due to any reason, just use the exclusion criteria and include the rest.
Let me let Dr. Soumitra Chaudhary respond to that briefly, sir, if you could. Then I'll go to Himanshu, then to Tarun Vijay.
What I was saying is that what you find that has been a decline in the poverty ratio. The decline has been sharper the last 5 years than in the previous 7 years. Different states have fared differently. Some states have fared rather well. For example, Orissa, which has had low economic growth, also Maharashtra, which has had high economic growth. So clearly there is no single explanation for these tendencies. There are specific, and they need to be studied if we want to improve our outcome on the poverty side.
Right, Dr. Chaudhary. Coming to Himanshu now. Now, let's change tack a little bit. Let's talk about Manrega a little bit and how only direct correlation between poverty and the action by the government to remove it seems to be Manrega, which guarantees 100 days of guaranteed income. Are these new estimates sort of proof that Narega has worked and has worked extremely well?
Actually, that is the key message that comes out from these surveys. One, that the growth has been lopsided in the sense, and growth has not benefited. At least if you look at the state level numbers, Bihar then should have had a higher reduction. Bihar doesn't show a very high reduction in poverty, or for example, other states in that sense. But on the other hand, it is also very clearly pointing to two important facts. One, poverty reduction has been higher in rural areas compared to urban areas. Rural areas were suffering through the severest drought that we had in 2009-10. Despite that, there is a significant reduction in poverty in 2009-10, and that must be credited to the significant amount of days of work that were created in 2009-10. And the second factor which has worked, along with the wage increase, that has worked is the significant amount of PDS reforms that most of the state governments have done by doing exactly what the food ministry is trying to do, is to basically go away from a targeted system to a universal system. The biggest success is
opposite of what the food
yeah. So the three big states where there is high poverty reduction, which I want to flag out, are Orissa, Tamil Nadu, and Himachal Pradesh. All these states have shown a huge improvement as far as the PDS program is concerned.
Right.
And I think that is where one has to learn the lessons. If it is just the purpose of the poverty line is to understand and get some messages, the messages are very clear. There are inequalities that have increased. These inequalities, in our case, because of consumption expenditure, are understated. We need to look back as to what policies actually work. Clear examples of that is MG Narega and the PDS,
right.
and how to make it working, that also the message is very clear.
Right. Let me go to Tarun Vijay and ask him this. Tarun, in the year 2009-10, Narega provided 52.53 million households with employment. 52.5 million people pulled out of poverty during that 5-year period from pre-Narega to post-Narega. Do you think it's a happy coincidence for the UPA government?
I think the figures are very untrustworthy because the government has itself accepted that there is a rampant and huge levels of corruption even in Narega. So the number cannot be trusted even in the BPL cards on which the government relies to draw conclusions about the poverty line and how many people have come out of poverty line or not. There is a huge fraudulent incidents in the cases of BPL cards. So these numbers are very sham. We don't trust, and the number of poverty people living below the poverty line should be more scientifically decided. I mean, this is something which no person can understand, that how can a person who is earning 29 rupees or 28 rupees 65 paisa is poor, and who is earning 30 rupees is not poor. This is a scheme of plot which denies BPL card to the millions of people, and this whole exercise looks very sham and untrustworthy.
Right. Let me ask Soumitra Chaudhary to respond to that. Sir, a very important question raised by Tarun Vijay. Also, let me add to that question, data quality. Doubts have been raised over data quality, not just in the current, the new estimates that the Planning Commission come out with, but other data that the government comes out with. Inflation data, for example, IIP data, revisions day in and day out. Do you think there's a problem with data quality?
There may be problems with data quality in some contexts, but as far as the NSSO is concerned, I think its ability to conduct the household survey in a scientific fashion, and its reliability of its data is widely acknowledged and appreciated. I would be the last person to cast a doubt on the quality of the NSSO data.
Right. Fair point. I think that's when we take a break right now. There's a lot more to be discussed on this issue. We'll do that after this short breather. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned to Rajya Sabha Television. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Picture, and this is the big poverty debate that is going on in the country today. Biraj, let me come to you. Who is poor? who is hungry?
Well,
How does the government decide? And I think we were talking about this before.
See,
how does the government decide what is normative?
Actually, the myth is that this number of 29 in 32 is going to be used to identify the poor. That's not true. It's not like government is going to do a survey and say, Athar, you're earning more than 29, you're not poor. And the socio-economic caste census would be used. However, the numbers that the Planning Commission comes up are the numbers that are used for the interstate caps. So it's a macro figure that is used to decide that 40% of resources for this program or X percentage will be allocated to Bihar and Y to Punjab. So that's at one level. Now the problem really comes is twofold. Firstly, we have made a dog's breakfast out of identifying the poor in this country. For the last 60 years, we've completely botched it up, especially after 1996 when we targeted our programs more sharply and did the APL BPL thing, because we've never factored in political economy.
Yeah.
The second issue is, I'm not so sure about this government's claim that the SECC is going to sort it out all. Because the SECC is being plagued everywhere with precisely the same problems that the earlier BPL survey had.
Right.
And the principal lesson for me in this is that it's way easier to identify the rich than the poor, use the exclusion criteria, give benefits to the rest. Don't go, you're going to save maybe 5,000 crores of subsidy on the food security bill, but you're going to send another 40,000 crores down the drain because you've wrongly identified the poor.
On that point, let's also listen into what Montek Singh Ahluwalia had to say when asked about what it would do to APL families and the social welfare schemes that they're entitled to right now. Would they not be entitled to that anymore? Let's see what Montek Singh Ahluwalia said in the afternoon to that question.
That the entitlement of food subsidy benefits are not being restricted to those below the official poverty line. That entitlement is separately going to be handled in the food security bill, which is not yet, which is with the standing committee.
Montek Singh Ahluwalia again there describing situation. Biraj, let me come to Dr. Samita Chaudhary. Briefly, sir, if you could, we don't have much time left. Like as Biraj was saying, what decides for the government who is poor and what is normative? How do you come to that conclusion that what is normative? Who can survive on 28 rupees a day, sir?
28 rupees, please, let's keep it in focus. We are saying per capita consists of grown men, children, infants and old people. Most family sizes are 5. So you want to make a realistic estimate, is 5 multiplied with the NPCE, if it is per day, 5 multiplied by 30 multiplied by that, comes to around 3,500 rupees for 2009-10 per family consumption expenditure and about 4,500 for urban areas. Independent estimates by Honorable Justice Wadhwa Committee of the Supreme Court also came to some similar number. These are not numbers, no one is saying these are comfortable numbers, these are desirable numbers. We are identifying the poor. These are not sufficiency estimates. We are identifying those who need help badly. That number is obviously not going to be a comfort number.
Right, sir. Let me come to Himanshu. Reactions on what Dr. Samita Chaudhary just said.
See, let me make it clear. I mean, first issue is that the whole issue of sufficiency of 28 rupees, 32 rupees is being asked in a particular context. We have had a history of poverty estimation, and the previous numbers were even lower. But I'm not saying that these are the numbers which are sufficient numbers. They are maybe starvation numbers, maybe destitution numbers, but you have to look at it for what purpose are they being used. If the purpose is just estimation, then probably they are reasonable. But if the purpose is to define entitlement, then definitely off the mark.
Right.
And that is where I think one must contest the statement by Montek Singh Ahluwalia, simply because the Planning Commission, although it says, and that is the October press conference that came out, that it will not use these numbers for defining entitlement, the message that comes from a Ministry of the Food is basically that the numbers are going to be used.
Right.
And that confusion is something that needs to be clear.
We are almost out of time. Biraj, last word on the show. These new estimates, are they helping at all?
Well, let me tell you, it's a public relations disaster for the Planning Commission. We may not be able to eradicate poverty in the short run, but we are certainly eradicating the reputation of the Planning Commission, and we might end up by eradicating the Planning Commission altogether.
I'm sure Dr. Samita Chaudhary does not agree with that, but we don't have time to get his reaction now. That's all the time we have tonight for you. I think this debate will take longer than half an hour till we do that show. It's goodbye from me in the studio. Till the next time we come back with another edition of Big Picture. Good night and thank you for watching.